Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. And welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. Milou, we've had a couple of really interesting episodes, kind of self-reflecting a little bit. I think this week we've got a new and interesting topic. But before we jump in, how are you doing?
I am doing great. I have a new family member who's hanging out in the office with me today. So I have another dog that just joined the crew. I'm not saying a new dog. I have another dog intentionally. And so if you hear more like heavy breathing in the background or something, or like a whine, that's why. It's not me, but it is the new coworker I have in my home office.
Yep, that's awesome. So glad to hear that. Speaking of home office, let's talk a little bit about kind of physical spaces. We've talked on and off in a few conversations about the physical security side of things, but I think this week we're going to talk a little bit broader about spaces and kind of how we view spaces and how we can kind of put a compliance and security lens on those things. So Milou, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah. We have definitely talked about physical security when we're thinking about security controls and what that looks like of having, locks on cages and being really mindful of, the physical space where your customer data lives, right? That's, I think, kind of the lens that we really talked about within our environment and our circumstance that we've had here on Socializing Security. But I actually, as a small business owner, have been really personally reflecting on what does it look like to actually decide you want a brick and mortar location and say, hey, like, I think I've grown out of my home office or I've grown out of my space. So I'm really hoping we could talk about that today.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic because there's a lot of things that go into it that I don't know that people would necessarily think about. The type of space that you need and how you can ensure confidentiality when you're talking to clients and customers, that kind of thing. The relationships that naturally develop when you're in a physical space with others. And just generally how you deal with securing that space. Whether that be from a locks and keys perspective or do you set up your own
Wi-Fi? I have a cool
Wi-Fi?
thing behind me. I'm laughing because I have something cool.
Obviously not planned.
Sorry, I'm just like pulling out of I'm still on a corded headphone. So, but I have a cool thing that I'm testing out. My family were European, and so like we grew up using IKEA furniture and IKEA things. And my parents actually turned me on to this, and so I'm kind of doing it as like a kind of like test to see these are actually like small physical like locks that you can have that have like a key fob, but they're actually like quite at an accessible price point. So like my mom dropped them off yesterday for me to like test.
Interesting. Yeah. There's a lot of innovative stuff in that space. I haven't done a ton of looking into it as far as what's good, what's not, what's out there, but being more digital, of course, everything's got a digital angle these days, whether that be using a key fob instead of a physical key. But there's a lot of really cool stuff around that space. So I guess as a small business owner, Milou, thinking about the potential of maybe having a concept of an idea of a physical location someday, what are some of the things that kind of come to mind for you?
So when we're thinking about coming up with a physical office location, and I think I can speak from my own perspective here of kind of where this is coming from. I will personally say that as somebody who's worked remotely since before the pandemic, since like before 2020, before that time frame, because I worked in tech, had flexibility where, I think my first boss in tech, he wasn't even in the same physical country, let alone physical office. So, I was expected to have my, sit in a cubicle for maybe like a day a week or something, which was a different policy than actually the rest of my team. Cause like it was just me and him. And so, whether or not in a seat in a cubicle versus like, you know, in an office. I just have had more freedom and space. And that works really well for me. I'm somebody, given the type of work that I do, sometimes it requires like some really deep focus work, which means I get really easily distracted by other people. I just sometimes have to really like put like blinders on, certain type of music, headphones, and just like focus in on what I'm doing. Say I'm reviewing a contract or doing something like, security incident report, whatever stuff that, occasionally I don't even want to do it. So it requires just like
Yeah.
more focus. So that is something that I personally have had to weigh to being like, well, I'm generally more productive like at my home office than I am in public because I'm just like super social by nature too. So like if I'm in a physical place with other people, I'm like, oh my God, like where have you been? I've been like lonely at my home office, I think.
Yeah.
And
Even us introverts need people connections.
yeah, I know. I know. You and I, like, I think I'm that in between. I recently did do a test and I'm apparently like totally different from an introvert extrovert perspective. So that's an interesting change I've actually have. I did a test like before the pandemic and then after, and it turns out my actual like social profile has changed too, just because of the nature of how much time I spend behind my desk alone, especially I work for myself, right? So like I have team members, I have clients, but I don't have colleagues necessarily. Like it's just a different relationship.
Yeah.
It's no longer, I don't really have that like friend dynamic at work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, you see a lot of small businesses moving into kind of a shared space, where multiple businesses kind of share a physical location, whether they have, a shared cube farm or a shared set of offices. Maybe they've got their own kind of space, but with a lot of common space where, when you need a surge day to day, you don't need anything more than your desk and your screens. And that's enough. But occasionally you need that office space or meeting space or, maybe even an event space. And that I remember hearing, especially pre-pandemic, a lot of people really enjoyed that kind of space when they were working for themselves or having their own business or a small, well-distributed team. You go into that space and you have the ability to run into other people on a regular basis. Um, and there wasn't anything other than the social aspect for it there because you're not working with those people day in and day out. So there's some opportunity to kind of have um, that social interaction, the water cooler moment, if you will. And of course, any interaction you have with people is going to potentially spark creativity or an opportunity. As an independent owner, sometimes the sales and marketing side of things is the hardest piece, and sometimes just running into random people is enough to spark something there.
Yeah, I think for me, that's kind of been the thing that I've been wrestling with, right? It's like on the one hand, I do client delivery where I do need that quiet space and I do need to occasionally just be like, hey, somebody can't look at my screens, right? I think that was something that I
Yeah.
really struggled with when I was actually supposed to sit in a cubicle. That I remember like I had to go to IT at one point and be like, hey, I'm working on some of like the most sensitive data that we have. I have to have screen protectors. And they were like, well, we have them for your laptop. And I was like, that's not going to work. I need them for this big screen because sometimes I'm looking at a spreadsheet and I'm like I was getting this like eye strain situation. And so, yeah, I remember I had to get special approval from, my bosses at the time to get a larger screen protector for like the entire screen. And I remember like even being frustrated that even had to go for approval because I was like,
Yeah.
this is a $50 thing. Like I'm telling you, this is like one, not only for like confidentiality reasons important, this is also just kind of like an access issue, frankly. Like I shouldn't have to like physically like pull my laptop all the way up and like zoom into it. So I think when you're thinking about how you do work, especially if you're a founder or a small business owner, or you're really honestly, anybody, you have to create the space within, you know, the offerings that are available to you, whether that is at a desk, in a location, whether that is at home, whether that is traveling. We have to basically like create accommodations for ourselves with these different types of scenarios where we find ourselves in. For example, if you're traveling for work, it's inevitable that you're going to have to join public Wi-Fi. So like you need to have a hotspot situation. You need to have a VPN. Like those are things that for me, those are also just kind of like the bare minimum that a
Yeah.
company should even offer, like as just truly like security type accommodations that also like help them. Nobody wants to get breached. Like nobody wants that. So like if you're going to get a VPN, like let's just get that set up from the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the type of role that you have, the work you're doing can really drive that. I was a developer at one point, which particularly for the web in the early days, you needed to have a bunch of different types of screens with a bunch of different resolutions, and you're constantly changing the settings, trying to figure out where it breaks. And then being more of a sysadmin type of a role, I just had lots of screens, just to watch different interfaces and a lot of multitasking because you'd kick off a process on one screen and then you'd shift to the other screen. And now doing more content development type of work. I've got 3 screens, one of which is my laptop itself. And, I've got one that can go from portrait to landscape and back fairly easily. So if I'm reviewing a really long document or, reading a really long web page and I don't want to have to be scrolling constantly, I'll flip it over into a portrait mode and be able to see an entire page at once. Meanwhile, I've got a giant screen that I can use for video editing and stuff like that. So knowing what you need is important, and the space with which you can have it. I'm kind of limited with the desk I have right now, and I'm thinking about getting a different desk just because the way I have things set up right now does warrant a slightly different setup than what I can do with my current one.
I think that's a really great call out what you said, because I think I also personally hold myself back occasionally where I'm like, oh, well, I have this screen and monitor that's worked. But I also need to be in the mindset of being like, this doesn't work anymore. Like, just because I have this piece of technology that like physically still works, I, just had to change how my monitors are on my desk because like my back is hurting, because I'm realizing like I have one here and then I have my laptop here and then I have another one over here. And inherently, for some reason, because I'm left-handed, I think I just prefer to like go over here. And so I just end up like turning, and then I realizing that like at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my gosh, why does my back hurt so badly? And I'm having to be like, okay, but what is it about my pattern and my habits that are happening that, we all, I feel like, slouch more because we sit at desks more, right? Like there's
Yep.
the craze of the walking pad was also just because like fundamentally we're all slouching if we sit behind our desk too much. So it's like coming up with different, being like, because I'm somebody, sometimes I genuinely sit down and I look up and it's been 7 hours and I'm like, oh, I haven't even gotten up. Like
Yeah.
I have the type of like kind of focus. Occasionally, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it means sometimes if I'm in the middle of a contract review, I will just like do this and I'll literally
Yeah.
like hold my shoulders high. I'm physically showing you if you're watching on the video, but otherwise I can communicate it of just, I raise my shoulders. I know that I do this. I work with like my doctors to figure out how to correct that. But also some of it is like, sometimes I just have to put a timer on my phone to like
Yeah.
get up and walk away from the desk.
Yep. Yep. And that's one of those things, that hyper focus aspect of things. You got to be thoughtful about things. When we record, I'm always standing. And
I
it's
didn't
kind of
know that.
ridiculous. Yeah.
That is
Um,
genuinely news to me. You don't seem like you're standing.
yeah. Well, and I don't move around
He's
as much as I
showing.
normally would.
He's showing. He just walked back and forth. But yeah, I sit in this chair and like I move around all the time.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
you were saying you stand?
yeah, that balance between sitting and standing. That's why the standing desk is such a craze. And I legitimately believe in it. Unfortunately, again, I do have a traditional old desk, so it's a little limited in what I can do. So what I have to do in order to stand is not as ridiculous as it used to be. But I do not have one of those desks that just raise everything up. So I've got to move things around. I got to bring my laptop up and sit it up here and then raise this monitor up and put this keyboard tray underneath my
Got
keyboard
like
and stuff.
accommodations within the space that you're in, given
Yeah.
the resources that are currently available to you.
Yeah.
I
And
think,
and to your point, like I'm using the stuff that I have because I'm that type of person. I could go out and I could spend my way out of this and make it so much easier for myself, but there's a part of me that just kind of likes the kind of hacked version of my desk that I don't know.
yeah, it's like I'm the same way in the sense that sometimes I'm occasionally just like, why am I doing it this way? And the reason I think this just back and forth between the two of us is so important on this particular episode that we're talking about is this is the stuff that founders and companies need to think about when they're planning on potentially like a return to office, right?
Hmm.
Because like what worked for employees 5 years ago before the pandemic circumstances most likely have dramatically changed, even for that individual that's suddenly saying, I want to return to office.
Hmm.
What made sense 5 years ago for those team members who maybe didn't have kids yet or who suddenly, are older or whatever, like, you're back, you could have injured yourself. That could happen at any time. And so thinking about, the fancy chairs that we bought 5, 10 years ago that sure they look good, they might still be the right thing, especially if we just had an empty office sitting there.
Yeah.
That actually might not feel great. And so I would say, just as somebody who's thinking about now having a space where not only I will be working there, but also other people, clients, guests, employees, like personnel would be coming into this space and working alongside me. I'm very much from the position of like, yes, 100%. Like, as the small business owner, it should work for me. Ultimately, like, these are things that like I'm going to create a space that like makes sense for me because I need to feel comfortable to work there.
Hmm.
But it also means I will personally say I've worked at a company once that they gave you a selection of chairs that you genuinely, like on your first day, part of it was like, oh, did you pick your chair? And I remember being like, what do you mean? I just will take whatever chair. Like that's how, who I am. Like, I'm like, I don't need the nicest chair. And they're like, no, like our like people ops team basically like has a standard and there are 3 different chairs and it's for like different size and your back and like you can go try them out. And I remember being like, this is nice. Also
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
Like, this is accessibility in practice in the sense that it's not that hard for a company to have a couple of different chairs in a conference room that the space is already there. And those are the like gold elite or whatever. And there's like small, medium, large, whatever the size is. Make it look nice. But when you have, I think it was one of those moments for me as a like new hire to this company being like, this is thoughtful. They've thought about this. They actually care about my back or like they care about,
Hmm.
because I'm probably going to sit in that chair. And I did, right? At that job, I sit in the chair all the time. So it was useful. But it's a small like culture thing that I really think companies should be thoughtful about when you're actually thinking about bringing individuals into the space and being thoughtful about like, what is the individual going to be doing? How they're going to interacting with this space? Are they going to just be sitting there at the desk? Are they going to be walking around? Like, I think that's kind of, especially in this kind of like multi-purpose type of like flex space environment that seems to be kind of like the craze these days.
Yeah. Obviously the open office is one of those situations that you either love it or hate it. Um, One of the things that I think a lot of people have learned working from home in their own space, somewhat isolated, is different work patterns. Like not just how they physically sit at the desk, but to your point earlier, needing to isolate yourself. Like and I'm the same way. There if I need to do focus work and sometimes even just to focus on any work, sometimes I've got to put on these headphones, I've got to play some pure instrumental, probably AI generated at this stage, and just let it run there in the background to be able to just be background noise. Like listening to music used to be my main thing at work, and the lyrics would distract me. It would pull me out of whatever I'm doing. Unless it was music that I just knew so well that it was just background music in my head. But instrumental music, on the other hand, gives me that capability. So giving your employees that capability to, and even yourself, like if I sit in a room, conference room, what do I look for when I sit down? Because I know how I work. One, I want to sit close to the whiteboard, especially if I'm going to be
Interesting.
doing
Okay.
any sort of like I'm a whiteboard nerd. If I can get in front of a whiteboard, I love it. Secondarily, what's the view out the window if there's a window there? And if there's something that's going to distract me, I need to put my back to that window. I need to not be able to see people out there mowing or people walking by or watching the traffic going on the interstate, 10 floors down. I'm thoughtful about that because I want to focus in on that group of people that are in that room with me at that time and not have those kinds of distractions. So being thoughtful about those types of things, both when you're sitting at your desk needing to heads down thought work, I'm horrible in an open concept, especially if there's nothing blocking me from the next person's desk, because I will constantly be getting pulled out of what I'm doing and seeing what they're doing and losing my train of thought and then having to context switch back and forth is the worst for me. and being able to create that environment that works for different people for different needs. And that may be having individual offices for everybody. It may mean having there's this kind of cool thing that I have at my work office, our home office, or not our home office, sorry, our headquarters. They're like these little phone booths that are designed primarily for taking calls. Like if you're on
Okay,
a
do
Zoom
they get
call,
weirdly warm though?
they get extremely warm because they're well contained. And
But like,
heat
why
builds up
has nobody thought to like vent those out? Like, I
because
know there's like it's the sound,
Mhm.
but there's got to be technology for like insulating without it being like a
Yeah,
bajillion degrees in those small little like. Because yeah, those are great
yeah,
until you have a meeting over an hour.
yes, yep. So whether it's providing something like that or encouraging people, like give everybody a pair of headphones as part of their onboarding. Like we want you to be able to do focus work, and some people need to isolate themselves. Here's a nice pair of headphones that are sound canceling, whatever.
I would even like push that further. Like, here's a selection of headphones. Because
Yeah,
I'm sure our
absolutely.
ear shape is very different. Like the type of headphones that I wear for this is different than what you're wearing. And the same thing that I actually would probably take it one step further and be like, if they want a certain standard or certain look, fine. Like if everybody needs to wear white or black, but also like this could maybe be an area for like a little bit of individuality at like an office environment
Oh,
of like,
hugely.
so maybe give them like a stipend for like
Yes.
headphones.
Well, and better yet, have a store where you can choose different options and they'll put the company logo on it, type of thing. Um, you know, last two companies I think I've onboarded to, here's $50, go shop in the company store, go buy some swag that has, go buy some hats or some jackets or whatever that has our logo on it so that you go out into the normie world and you can advertise for us. And it's a something nice kind of gift that, you may get as a nice giveaway at a booth or some sort of event. So yeah, it's about giving people the ability to work the way they need to. I could go on and on. We could do another whole episode on headphones because
We
they
could
get a
really,
little nerdy with
because
that.
Brian's going to love to hear this, but I actually reached out to one of his favorite like hearing device companies really recently. That's based out of Belgium, and reached out to see if there was any world in which they would
Oh,
ever consider working with us, which is like a really fun
I
thing.
see where
But
you're going with this. Yeah.
there is a technology company that Brian and I are both pretty big fans of, that I recently reached out to just see if like they would ever be open to the conversation. But I think something as simple as hearing, these are all the types of like access things that I would just love for somebody to think about, and think about it not just for yourself, like unless it's a private space, right? If it is really like you're like, this is my home office, this is my sanctuary, this is where I'm gonna like get my work done, I would say be selfish in that regard there and do that. Brandon and I are not coming from a place of like, you don't need to have the most expensive things. Like, you and I are both quite frugal, I think, when it comes to this stuff. So it's being mindful of like, I have purchased screens secondhand before, right? Because I was like, hey, like, I actually don't mind that there's some nicks on this. Like, big box stores occasionally do some really great clearance. Like,
Yep.
that's just, and I've, you know, I've been one to just take a Sharpie, right? And just put something in because I'm like, wasn't perfect. Works for me. Like, it was in my budget and
Good
price
enough.
point. So I'm not coming from this place of like, I need the fanciest thing. I'm actually now coming from a place of like, wow, I've actually probably like outworn the tech that I have. So for me, I'm actually trying to figure out like, okay, I actually do probably want the huge screen, which I used to think was just like outlandish and
Yeah.
was like, who needs that? And now I'm like, oh, actually, I think I need that. But then how can I repurpose the screens that I have? Whether that
Hmm.
is being like, hey, those are going to be the screens for, like an executive assistant or like a team member that's working and they don't have any screens. I'll already have monitors available. Like, why not? If they work, there's nothing wrong with them. I'm the person that I think I've joined different startups and they were like, here's a stipend for your home office. And I was like, I don't need anything. Like, keep it for something else. Like, thank you so much. But I'm at the point now where I'm trying to like think about, what does this space look like? And I'm trying to design it with myself in mind, with my client in mind, my co-host in mind, my neighbor down the street, my family. Like, I'm trying to think about like, who is going to visit a physical space for my companies. I actually don't have a traditional job. I work many different jobs. And so for me, like, it's not going to look like a traditional space. I've never fit in that
Yep.
world ever. Like, I have walked into like corporate offices. I mean, I used to work in a law firm, right? You really can't get as like buttoned up and I felt claustrophobic. So for me, that just won't work. It needs to feel like a super inviting, like social space, but it does need to have some separation that like, if occasionally like I'm either on a client call or like need to be able to shut the door or like not be available, that has to exist. Otherwise, then the home office is still going to be here. So yeah, as we're continuing just this thought around what does it look like for me for compliance counsel and for, cyber counsel, my law firm, like what does it look like to come up with a physical space that my audience, I'm going to use audience, I think that's a useful word in the sense that we can all understand from like a public speaking perspective. You should tailor your your speech to whoever is listening. I think the same goes for an office space, especially in a more hybrid type of environment where, your team members are going to be sometimes remote, sometimes in person. Like, you want to have this collaboration space. You want to have the ability to host public, private events, whatever it is. I think being thoughtful, and I think this is a huge differentiator for companies where people want to stay versus companies where employees are like, no thanks. It is the small things that matter, like having 3 different chairs options to choose. That
Yeah.
costs that company so little money. My guess is they probably had version 1. Somebody ordered a medium or something, and suddenly they were like, oh, we have 3 different sizes. And fortunately, the IT organization and HR at that company was like, hey, hold up, wait, before you get rid of these, let's use this as a culture moment. And let's actually
Hmm.
just part of the onboarding experience is to bring new hires into this space and feel welcome and then be like, hey, look around. You see there's different chairs. We're all different shapes and sizes, whatever. You could turn this into like a thing. But also, it's really like, look around you. These are your peers. Also, these are your chairs and these are the options. And it's something as simple as that. I will never forget that because it was one of those things that I was like, this is really smart. And I want to copy this at some point, and I'm going to try my best to use it. I'm like really uniform things. So I'm probably going to have the same chairs, but it might still just be like a selection, same brand.
Yeah. I think that is a great example. Some businesses standardize on either Windows or Mac or a specific type of vendor. While you can get some buying power there, you've got to be pretty big to get some real buying power in that space. So that's another area where I love when I start, they say, do you want A, B, or C for your computer? And I know a lot of people that just aren't productive on Mac, but I love Mac myself. So
Mm-hmm.
which one do you choose? Becomes a very individualized concept of things.
Yeah. And some of that I think also is like, those are just accommodations that as companies like grow and scale, what makes sense for, a 1-person shop or a 10-person shop, 100, 500, 1,000, 50,000, it starts to look really different the more individuals you have within this kind of like network of talent. So I will say I am pretty excited. I think I might have a physical space at some point. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. I'm like pretty stoked about it as a possibility. It's something I also fundamentally am shocked to hear myself say because I was very much like, I will never go back into an office after like the pandemic when that just really opened this whole new flexibility for me for what work looked like. So I will say for me, I am personally shocked by this like just true 180. For me, though, it has more to do about lead generation and bringing clients into the space than it does for me for like trusting the people that work with me. For me, that's very much like I hire good humans and like if they can't do their jobs, they're not the right fit for my companies ultimately. So like it has nothing to do with like this type of I don't know, this kind of culture of like surveillance that I just find really icky. For me, it's
Yeah.
actually like, no, I'm coming from a place of let's meet in person, let's collaborate, let's find a way that my clients can benefit from this, that my team members can benefit from this, that our podcast can benefit from this. Like how cool.
And I wouldn't call it a 180 by any means. Like you're taking the flaws of what you didn't like with the pros of what you do like working from home and reimagining them in a space that works for you and what you need to do. And I think that's cool. That's exciting. And I think we should
It
all
is
do
exciting.
more of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So hopefully we'll see what happens next year in 26, but I did have a stretch goal for myself that in 2026 for South by Southwest, I was hoping to be able to like host an in-person event and sponsor like 2 different nonprofits I really, really care about. And like, how cool would it be if it could actually be in a space that I actually like designed as opposed to just a space that, I'm renting. If it's one that I lease or borrow, whatever, that's cool too. There is a potential kernel of hope that I might actually have accidentally manifested really hard and could actually have a true in-person event for South by Southwest.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Awesome. Well, I think that will do it for today. We appreciate you all joining us and socializing with us. Not a super techie topic this week, but I think happy people are more secure people. So all good things for whether you're a small business owner or not. Thinking about the space that you have can make a big difference. So we appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to talking to you on the next episode.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.